So today I was asked to talk a little bit about guilt, which is a really important thing to talk about. So I'm glad that it came up. And the meditation that we'll do to help kind of cleanse and shift and move it is a kind of a traditional purification meditation, but I'll do it in a really open, secular way. And the basic idea in Buddhism is that what we normally talk about in the West, if we were brought up Jewish or Christian or some Judeo-Christian setup, normally the idea of guilt that we were grown up with is very different to how Buddhists describe regret. So guilt and regret are seen as very different things. And in Tibetan Buddhism particularly, there's actually not even a word for guilt. And when you try to explain it to the Tibetan lamas, they say, "Oh, that's terrible, you poor things. Are you okay? That's terrible. Why would you do that to yourself?" Because they're a lot more, I think, easy with not identifying with their faults, not identifying with their mistakes, while at the same time taking full responsibility for them. Because everything in Buddhism is about shifting out of over-identification and breaking the illusion of separateness. So when they've done something wrong, it's not like they pretend that they haven't. It's that they say, "Oh, well, that was a mistake. I should stop." You know, and it's a bit cleaner. It's a bit how we feel like if we were walking across the living room holding a glass of water and we spilled some of the water, we would think, "Oh, oops, I spilled some water." But it's not like we think we're a terrible person. We think, "Oh, we got a little distracted, so we spilled some water. Whoops, I'll walk slower." You know, and it's not like a big, huge story of why you're a fundamentally spilling person, right? So the way to kind of look at guilt as opposed to regret is to really identify, what does guilt feel like? What does guilt do? And then how is it actually not in alignment with reality? And so there's a few different versions of guilt that we, maybe grew up with or were learned by example from our parents or from the people around us. But it's a bit like you think, all right, I either do bad things or I've done a mistake, and therefore, if I feel bad about it, that kind of makes up for having done it. And I need to feel bad about it. Otherwise, I can't make up for it. And that whole feeling bad is an essential component to being a good person who has made mistakes, which is kind of a weird idea, but it's kind of in the background of a lot of our guilt, is that the feeling bad is somehow making up for the having done the mistake. Yeah, that they're somehow related, that you have to punish yourself. Otherwise, you're not a good person. Another thing that guilt can do is to say, if I feel bad about it, then I'm kind of allowed to keep doing it, whatever it is, right? I know I shouldn't, I know it's negative. Knowing that kind of allows me to keep going. And so, you just kind of carry a humiliated shame with you, but never change. As if humiliation and shame is the price you pay to get to do the wrong thing. That's another element of guilt that sometimes we have. Other forms of guilt are you feel completely identified with all of your deficiencies, all of your mistakes, and there's this kind of defensiveness or secrecy, not wanting to be found out. If people only knew who I was, they wouldn't love me. Or if people only knew who I was, they wouldn't respect me. And there's kind of a secrecy and a closing in on itself that can happen, right? So just kind of, there's a million different kinds of guilt. We all have our favorite. But just to kind of sit with how much it's tied to over-identification and how much it's tied to, I have to feel bad. That's, I have to feel bad and all of these things are me. Or, is there another element of guilt that comes into our life that's not those two? What is guilt like? If you were to sort of explain it to a Tibetan Lama who's never heard it before, how would you explain guilt? Do you carry guilt of your ancestors? Do you carry guilt of your family? Do you carry guilt of things you didn't do, but you witnessed and didn't do anything about? You know, we carry this heaviness about so many things. You know, I think that if you can come to the Buddhist idea, things are simpler. Things are a lot simpler with the Buddhist framework. Not simplistic, but kind of cleaner. So in Buddhism, instead of guilt, we generate on purpose regret. And regret, the definition of regret in Buddhism is just seeing a fault to be a fault. Not thinking you are at fault or people are at fault or, you know, nothing like that. Just a clean, clear seeing a fault to be a fault. So you take a very small example that you're not too wrapped up in, like, I don't know, I was critical of a family member to another family member. You know, I was being critical and they know the story. We've gone through the story a million times. I didn't really need to bring up that old story again. You could have guilt and think, oh, I'm so bad for being critical. I'm such a bad critical person. Or you could have regret that says, it's actually a fault to be critical like this, especially when there's no productive element to it. I'm not problem solving. I'm not trying to figure out why they got that way. I'm not trying to figure out why I'm responding this way. I'm just whining. That's a fault, right? Just objectively, that's not really how I want to live. That's not really what I'm about. And I do it because of habit, not because I'm bad. I do it because of habit. It's something learned. It's something that was encouraged just by the people around me in my life. It's only natural that I do it. However, it's not the way I want to live. And so seeing a fault to be a fault, it kind of brings some objectivity to your own experience. There's a bit of space there. So just like if you spilled some water walking across the room, you just think, oh, I need to walk slower. I need to not fill the glass up so high. It's not me, you know, it's not like some fundamental fatal flaw. It's just, I forgot something that I knew. It can sound simplistic, but it's not. It's simple, not simplistic. We make things way too complicated, trying to justify how we got this way. Trying to justify how we got this way reinforces the false sense of I. You know, it doesn't dispel the illusion. It doesn't pierce the veil, the whole problem of our existence. It doesn't do anything to combat the fundamental problem. It actually reinforces it. Because even if you don't like yourself, the sense of self is strong. And when the sense of self is very strong, the sense of other is very strong. And then there is threat, you know, and then there's agitation and there's isolation and there's feeling alone and disconnected and misunderstood. The less identification you have with self, the more expansive and connected you feel, which is closer to reality. So in Buddhism, when we're going through a process of purification, what we do is just sit with, what are my core values? What is the way I want to live my life? And how did I go off track? Yeah, just probably because I was distracted. Yeah, most of the time we do the wrong thing because we're distracted, not plotting, you know, not plotting to do the wrong thing. And you think, all right, criticism, for example, is not the way I want to live. What's a plan to change the pattern? And it has to be so small that you're almost embarrassed to name it to yourself. Because if you say, I will never be critical again, that's nonsense, right? No one is that focused. No one is that self-aware all the time. You'll forget, and then you'll be disappointed in yourself, and then you'll feel even worse. So if you say, okay, tomorrow at breakfast with my husband or whoever, I'm not going to be critical about so-and-so who I've been talking about for the last 2 weeks. Tomorrow only, breakfast only, I'm just going to not. So small, right? And you're embarrassed to even name it to yourself. But it interrupts the continuity, right? It breaks up the momentum. And then once you've done it in a short period of time, you can gradually expand it and expand it. But you have to start very small. So there's a formula for purification, which is basically to sit with regret under the gaze of your refuge. You're trying to visualize, we would say, the Buddha Vajrasattva, but it could just be white light above the crown of your head, which represents compassion. And imagine whatever you think of as enlightened energy or divine energy or idealized self-object or whatever it is, and think that that is bearing witness to your regret. It's watching you confess, and it's holding you with so much love and so much understanding that sees all the variables of how we got this way. So then you're able to say, I've done this and this and this mistake, and you don't feel humiliated and ashamed. You feel freed and released because now you're naming the things that have been eating you in the background. Yeah, so you do regret under the gaze of your refuge. Then the meditation is like a remedy. It's like the medicine. It's, we would say it clears the negative karma. It shifts the energy. And it can just be a very simple flowing down white light, flushing your system clean. You can add a mantra. There's a traditional mantra. You can use other mantras that you feel connection with, or not, just white light, but just really sit with that compassionate energy, that embodiment of my spiritual refuge, whatever it is flowing down and through, breaking up the circuit of my negative patterns. And then at the end, you think about that little plan, that little promise or resolve. Tomorrow at breakfast, I'm not going to whine about so-and-so. So small, yeah, so tiny that you can't fail if you stay awake. Because if it's too big and you fail, you become even more disillusioned with yourself and you reinforce the whole guilt monster. So once you've made this tiny promise, then your refuge object dissolves into you, maybe comes to rest at your heart or just kind of absorbs in. And you get off your cushion and you decide living differently is possible. I just have to be very gentle with myself, very practical and self-aware. And I have to keep my sense of humor. Yeah, I have to keep my sense of humor that knows, despite valuing things like compassion and patience and kindness, I'm going to do things that are completely the opposite to that. Of course I am, because eons of habit, or even just one life of habit. So if I am too holding on to being a good person, that becomes its own trap. So from a Buddhist perspective, being a good person means you recognize your faults, not that you don't have faults. Do you see the difference, right? It's recognizing the faults, not having them. So if you recognize your faults and you address them, then you're back in alignment with your values. Get on with your life, get on with your day. It's not like you're holding this big bag of regrets with you, carrying your whole life, adding another rock every time you make a mistake. That's no way to live. But in a way, we feel like we're supposed to, because we want to be a good person, and yet we make mistakes. So shouldn't we carry all those mistakes with us to be a good person? It's a funny lie that we've told ourselves, but it is kind of what guilt says to do. Regret says, drop the bag of rocks. Just drop the bag of rocks and keep walking. So it's the difference between attributing fault and attributing responsibility. That's the big difference in Buddhism. You're not attributing fault, but you're completely holding responsibility. You think this mistake came from this area that I occupy through countless causes and conditions, therefore it's my responsibility. But to say that it's my fault is over-identifying. Because if I were to look at the moment in time I feel guilty about, if one or two factors had been different, a different decision would have been made. Then the mistake wouldn't have happened. Why am I taking all of this fault onto myself when it was countless conditions coming together that made it possible? Doesn't make sense. So we'll do a little purification meditation, but before we do that, do you want to ask anything or gently argue about anything? It's clear the difference in Buddhism between how normally we think of guilt and how we look at regret. So in the meditation, we're basically just going to go through purifying actions of the body, purifying actions of speech, purifying actions of mind. And I'll kind of just invite some material into your meditation, which may or may not be relevant to your particular life. So if it's not your particular faults, don't worry about it. There's a longer list. But basically, we go through the 10 non-virtues in Buddhism, which are a bit similar to the 10 Commandments, but nothing about coveting neighbor's oxen. But basically, the similar ideas. Basically, looking at physically the actions that are the most negative are, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, meaning adultery in the modern era. And adultery is only negative if there is betrayal and deception involved. If everybody's okay with it, then, you're adults. It's none of my business. Speech, lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, idle gossip. And then mentally, covetousness or like grasping desire, ill will, anger, irritation, everything of that genre, and wrong views, clinging to types of ignorance and mistaken views. Wrong views aren't something that we have as obvious as maybe we did back hundreds of years ago. We probably don't think that animal sacrifice will lead to liberation, right? That's an example of a wrong view. Basically, it's clinging to views with fundamentalist energy. So anyway, so when we do purification, we're just kind of examining the habits that pull us off track. Yeah, and just letting it go, drop the bag of rocks, flush it clear. I made you a little list of the steps. You don't have to look at it or read it, but for those of you that like to know where we're going with the meditation, I'll just put it on the screen. But if you'd rather just close your eyes and meditate, then don't worry. So this Vajrasattva you can visualize as just white light. You don't need to visualize it in the Buddhist form. It can just be radiant white light that embodies compassion, wisdom, kindness. And the mantra that we'll do is Om Vajrasattva Hum. So if you want to just sit comfortably, but with stability. And as you come to your posture, just really ground yourself. And then think of a very strong, positive motivation for doing this practice. May I let go of guilt. May I let go of shame. May I let go of all forms of negative identification while still taking full responsibility for mistakes. And in taking full responsibility for mistakes, may I let them go as well and change the patterns that allowed for them to arise. I do this for myself. I do this for my relationships. And I do this for all sentient beings. And shift your focus to the breath. And just watch the breath, letting the surface distractions settle, allowing the mind's clarity to reassert itself. Just be with the breath. Using the breath to steady the mind, to gently focus the mind. When other thoughts arise, no need to push them away, no need to pull them forward. Just allow them to arise and dissolve like waves in the sea, keeping your main focus just on the breath, like a surfer riding those waves. And now visualize above the crown of your head is a radiant white light in the shape of a sphere, brilliantly white, like the sun reflected off snow mountains. And if it feels comfortable, you can put the image of Vajrasattva in the center of that light, kind and radiantly smiling, representing and embodying all positive states, all divinity and enlightenment. Or you can leave it as simple white light, embodying and representing these qualities. And so just take a minute to stabilize your spiritual refuge in the form of white light above your head. Above your head, watching you, holding you with complete understanding, with complete compassion and love. Knowing your mind, knowing your life and your habits even better than you do, without any harsh judgment whatsoever. There is no threat of punishment. There is no price to pay. Only loving, compassionate observation. And as the compassionate energy bears witness to you, generate the power of regret by first thinking about negative actions of the body. Things like killing, taking life, stealing, taking what hasn't been freely offered. sexual misconduct, taking the partners of others, betraying our own promises, etc. Or anything else physically that you know has been off track, not your path. And see if you can just name those mistakes to yourself with a very courageous self-honesty that clean and clear sees a fault to be a fault. And so list those negative actions of body under Vajrasattva's compassionate gaze. And keep your mind from falling into shame or defensiveness, from humiliation or justification. Try to stay very clean, clear, just recognizing faults to be faults. Have I ever been careless with life, disregarded life, or taken life? Have I ever disregarded the possessions of others, taken them for granted, harmed or destroyed them? Have I ever taken what hasn't been freely offered? Have my romantic relationships and sexual relationships been ethical? Have I kept my promises? Have I honored the promises of others? And just very gently allow yourself to generate regret related to the body. Allowing your mind to go back into your memories, seeing if there's any patterns or repetition of the same mistake many times, or any significant big breaches in ethics. If we acknowledge them, we can let them go. If we suppress them and talk over the top of them and minimize them, and they just eat us and feed guilt. So let yourself go there. Explore your past. No justification, no excuses. You know that there are many causes and conditions. The enlightened mind knows there are many causes and conditions. Take responsibility. Don't fall into fault. And then think, these physical mistakes are not me. These physical mistakes are not mine alone. But I was an instrument in some kind of relative harm to myself and to others. And because of that harm, these physical mistakes are mistakes. They are not my path. And so I recognize them, and now I let them go. And imagine that white light from Vajrasattva, or the enlightened white energy above the crown of your head, flows down through your crown chakra, filling up your whole head, down to your neck, through your body and limbs, white light pervading every part of your body, flushing you clean and filling you up. And as this purifying white light flows down through you, if it feels comfortable, you can add the mantra. Om Vajrasattva Hum, Om Vajrasattva Hum, Om Vajrasattva Hum. 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 And feel purified of those physical mistakes. And now shift to thinking about mistakes made with your speech, particularly lying and also divisive speech, speech that is true but is meant to divide others. Harsh speech, various types of criticism, using your words as weapons, as well as idle or senseless speech, just filling in space without purpose, stealing time from the profound, watering down the power of our words. So under Vajrasattva, or the compassionate wisdom, very gently acknowledge faults to be faults without slipping into guilt. What are the negativities of speech that I do? Specifics, as well as general habits and patterns. How do I misuse my speech? What harm do I cause with my speech? How do I use my speech in a way that is not the path I want to live? Courageous self-honesty, held with compassion. And looking at speech is not so much looking as just the content, but the motivation behind the words. Do the words carry anger, carry attachment and neediness, carry a vagueness and ignorance? What are the patterns of my words when they've gone off my path? And having named these faults, without defensiveness, without excuses, knowing that every behavior exists within a context, as well as every response. Still, on the relative level, we were an instrument, one tiny component in some harm that was done. And so we regret it, clean and clear, and come back into alignment with our path. And purifying white light flows down through us, breaking up and dispelling those patterns of negative speech, soothing the mind, purifying the speech, releasing the heaviness, shifting the pattern. White light continually flowing down through you and filling you. And as we completely purify the speech, you can add the mantra. Om Vajrasattva Hum, 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 Om Vajrasattva Hum. And feel that the speech has been purified. And now recognize and acknowledge negative patterns of mind, particularly those in the category of covetousness, desire, attachment, those in the category of ill will, anger, hatred, those in the category of wrong views, ignorance, fundamentalism. You can think of this very day as your example of the common negative patterns in the mind, or else remember a bad day recently, what sort of tone or mood you allowed to take over the mind. And under Vajrasattva's compassionate gaze, just name them, notice them. Courageous self-awareness, held by the enlightened energy. What are the negative habits and actions of my mind? Ask yourself. There are those negative states of mind that simply arise out of habit. And then there is the additional component of those then we allow. Covetousness, ill will, wrong views might just arise. But when do we allow them, feed them, agree with them? And then they stay and grow. When do these things happen? Try to gently see the mistake in that. They could simply arise and then die a natural death if they weren't fed. The main issue is when they arise and we feed them, when we agree with them, when they're unquestioned. And so those habits of mind that are negative that we remember, as well as inferring all those habits that we don't remember, but are of a similar type. We release and purify as the light flows down again from the radiant white light at our crown, the compassionate energy of Vajrasattva flowing down and through us, filling us up, shifting the energy, purifying the negative karma, bringing us peace. And adding the mantra, purifying the mind. Om Vajrasattva Hum, 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 Om Vajrasattva Hum. And feel purified, body, speech, and mind. And then make 3 very small, very achievable plans. Physically, what can be different and non-harmful. Verbally, what can be different and non-harmful. Mentally, what can be different and non-harmful. Very short, very achievable plans for each. What will I do differently? Body, speech, and mind. And the radiant white light at the crown of your head absorbs and dissolves down into you, blessing your body, speech, and mind, ripening your potential for awakening. And then dedicate the energy of this practice through the energy of acknowledging and purifying any faults. May I continue to be of benefit to both myself and others. expanding into our fullest potential for kindness, for love, for peace. May all of this carry the wisdom that understands interdependence and the lack of any independent existence. Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you.